it out for 6 more weeks in one of the hardest-fought presidential campaigns in history.
Today, on Election Day, the big question is, how will the people vote?
America may be choosing a president, but they're also determining the destiny of the Kennedy dynasty.
The whole family gathered in Hyannisport. They set up a war room. They brought in dozens and dozens of phone lines to communicate with campaign directors all over the country, and they waited.
It appears that Senator Kennedy is moving into the lead.
But as the night went on, the early lead that Kennedy had seemed to drift away.
When Ohio went for Nixon, the Kennedy team began to wonder whether they would win this at all.
Senator Kennedy's early lead of 2 million votes dwindles perilously as the returns come in from the western states.
The suspense very much focused on Illinois, which reported very late.
Northern Illinois, Chicago, was controlled by Mayor Daley, and Southern Illinois was controlled by the Republicans.
Richard J. Daley was a very powerful mayor of Chicago, and he had a relationship with Joe Kennedy.
So Jack gets Daley on the phone, and Mayor Daley says, we're going to win Illinois with the help of a few close friends.
There are stories to this day that dead people voted in Chicago. There's no...
Think of the geography of Hyannisport. You have the main house where Rose and Joseph P. Kennedy lived. Next to it, you have the house where Bobby and Ethel live. Behind it, you have the house where Jack Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy live. And now this compound is the center of the world. This was the realization, the dynastic dream of Joseph P. and Rose Kennedy.
Next on American Dynasties, the Kennedys.
Ask what you can do for your country.
Jack believed in the promise of America.
Kennedy was walking into an ambush, and he had no idea.
It turns out to be an unmitigated disaster.
Jack needed someone to watch his back.
I am pleased to accept the position of the Attorney General.
Hello, America. Welcome to Life, Liberty, and Levin. And I'm here with Dr. Larry Arnn. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. With you.
Chill. And today's show, we're going to dive deeply into these issues. Let's start with independence, and maybe you can help explain some of these words to us, because we read it, it goes really in our mouths, out our ears, but these...
mostly on the motion of John Adams, they picked Thomas Jefferson, who had proved to be a beautiful writer of pamphlets. American Revolution.
Of the Declaration until they finalized it, isn't that
That's
correct?
right. That's right. There was, he sat and wrote it in a room by himself.
All right, let's start at the beginning. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of the laws of nature and of nature's God. Are those important? What does that mean?
Well, they're a political act of a people, a people formed by this act. And yet, it starts out in right, so and universal. Now, the legal act that they undertake is to separate themselves from the strongest, and they need some standard to do that by. And so, for the first time in human history, in this particular political act...
Dining from all of that, that's not what Pope's supposed to do.
For 2,000 years, the legacy of St. Peter has been a divine office passed down from one pope to the next. But can two men hold a legitimate claim to one godly office?
It's left us with this situation of a pope and an extra pope. And that's always going to change the nature of an institution. Who's the real pope?
In 2013, millions of people watch as Benedict XVI peacefully hands the papacy over to Pope Francis. But in the past, two living men with claim to one legacy has resulted in nothing but chaos.
In the 10th and 11th centuries, if you've got two popes, you've got two factions. It's an extraordinary episode.
Benedict IX was a teenager. He was the most eligible member of the powerful Roman family that ruled the city of Rome. They wanted him to be pope for their own financial gain, their own territorial supremacy.
The papacy was the legal center of the Western world. If a king needed a dispensation to marry his brother's wife, if people wanted to take possession of a local parish, they would have to get permission and pay a fee at Rome. You are enormously powerful, immense responsibility.
But 19-year-old Benedict has no interest in bureaucracy or public service. He is only interested in the privileges of power.
Benedict is someone who was clearly made pope in order to enrich his family. On the secular side, not someone who had any sort of a spiritual authority, even spiritual training.
Nepotism tended to produce a group of wealthy parasites who lived like grandees, who were also clergy.
He was incompetent. He was morally compromised in many ways.
Benedict was up to his neck in robbery and murder. He was using his position to gain wealth at the expense of the people of Rome.
By the year 1044, the cardinals are fed up. They decide the church needs a real spiritual and political leader. Something must be done.
The holiest priest in Rome came to him and said, "You need to step down for the good of the church. What can I give you?" And made him some sort of offering.
Benedict IX sold the papacy,
which of course is against the canons.
In the 11th century, conclaves had not yet been invented. Popes are often chosen by brute force or nepotism.
Buying church power was considered one of the worst sins there was.